Hi everyone. The topic for this week is democracy. So last week we discussed the topic of justice. We compared two different views, which are John Rawls and Robert Nozick's. This week we will talk about democracy and two different perspectives regarding the topic. Two scholars are James Madison and Jean Jacques Rousseau. Let's start with the main theme that lies under the two different perspectives of Madison and Rousseau. So it is about creating a buffer or impediment in democratic society that would prevent the individualizing or communalizing forces of a society from changing the very basic structure, which can cause chaos. So you may wonder what this means, and we will discuss in depth from next slide. Starting with James Madison, who was one of the founders of the United States and also was fourth US president. Its first point was that social forces left unchecked can lead to a form of factionalism with the potential to subvert property rights and to impose religious ideology on the citizens of the United States. In other words, he was afraid of citizens becoming a social forces that could be changed to faction. In this statement, faction means a number of citizens, whether whether amounting to a majority or a minority of the whole, who are united and actuated by some common impulse of passion or of interest, adverse to the rights of other citizens, or to the permanent and aggregate interests of the community. So, okay, it seems a lot, but in a simple way of explaining this is that he was worried about grouping of people becoming a social force that only pursues their own interests and becoming a reason for a conflict. So he believed that if general citizens are left unchecked, people would organize a group of force that move in a direction of violating other citizens' rights with often using violence. In sum, he was afraid of the faction that is based on a fear of collectivist social forces. Madison's second point is that humans are inherently irrational and self interested, and thus unable to defend themselves from the temptations of factionalism in securing what they want without regarding to the common good. In other words, his view on humans are similar to Hobbes in that he saw humans are not rational and also they are the ones who only pursues self-interest. He viewed humans from a negative view so that naturally they involved in a conflict in the process of process of pursuing their own interests and try to steal other people's properties with power. As long as the reason of man continues fallible and he is at liberty to exercise it, different opinions will be formed. And as long as the connection subsists between his reason and his self love, his opinions and his passions will have a reciprocal influence on each other. And the former will be objects to which they will attach themselves. This means that he thought people have passions in the pursuit of their own self interest based on their self love. This means that they are likely to become irrational in their pursuit of their self interest with passion. As they are so passionate about it, they lose their reason, or they they don't do the reasonable thinking. Let's move on to his third point. His and this point is that uh, advocates for a republican form of government to cool the passions of those who would infringe upon the rights of the individuals. So, what is a republican government? It is the system that people have uh, that people have an ultimate power of government because they are voted as electives through election to represent citizens' interests. So, in this sense, representatives are responsible of helping not just a few people, and they should be responsible of helping all people in the nation. This is possible in that different interests are dispersed in a nation, and in order for them to be re-elected, they need to consider interests of different groups. And further, as the leaders are multiple, their voice for many different interests will be in a plate, meaning that they need to find a way to consider all common welfare. Madison believed that republicanism can create a buffer between those who are in a direct democracy. Uh, so Madison believed that republicanism can create a buffer between those who are in a direct democracy to make poor decisions. So he thought, in other words, he thought republicanism uh, as a solution for the chaos created by a direct democracy. And further, he believed that educated elite understand the true interests of citizens and the nation. So he was like supporter of elite politics. And the public voice pronounced by the representatives of the people will be more consonant to the common good that if pronounced by the people than it pronounced by the people themselves, convened for the purpose. Madison's fourth point is that the protection of the minority and justice. So he considered the minority as the landed elite and the justice uh, as the as that as the as a justice that is derived from protecting one's property from expropriation by the irrational masses. Again, his biggest concern was the irrational masses that create conflicts and violence in the society. He thought the elite, who are minorities, should be protected, like protected from those irrational masses. Further, his justice was protecting one's property from those irrational masses. He viewed that measures are too often decided not according to the rules of justice and rights of the minor party, but by the superior force of an interested and overbearing majority, thus prevailing and increasing distrust of public engagements and alarm for private rights, which are acted from one end of the continent to other. So, in other words, he put emphasis on the private rights due to his distrust of public participation. He thought a rational public would never reach to rational and effective decisions. And he viewed that effects of the unsteadiness and injustice with which a factious spirit has tainted our public administration. Then let's move on to uh, the views of Jean-Jacques Rousseau for democracy. So Rousseau's first point is that a direct democracy would lead to a discernment of the general will of the people, and thus the true good that would be in the interest of the society as a whole. So different from James Madison, Rousseau viewed the positive side of the people, uh, though like it is not always, but he's like on the side of it. So he trusted that direct democracy, which allows the ultimate decision made by the public as the best way to come up with true good and address the benefits of a society as a whole. So, in any body of voters, if one considers voter to be rational and those voters cast their votes independently without communication, they they the changes they changes the outcome. If they can come up with outcomes that are rational and therefore good for the society, and if those votes increase, the good for the society also increases. So he trusted that people can make rational voting even without communication. If more rational cast a vote, the again likelihood of the relevance of the voting decisions, he believed, also increase. Rousseau's next point is that human decisions are based on reason and that the majority of individuals are capable of using that reason to make correct decisions when they are not influenced by others. Again, Rousseau trusted in people making the right and rational decision by themselves, even if not all are rational. He thought the majority is rational. In his view, interestingly, the lack of communication between voters is important, which is the reason for the faction distrust. The he's the reason for the faction distrust. He thought that when people started to communicate each other, they are likely to be subject to become a faction that creates instability of the society. If, when a sufficiently informed people deliberates, the citizens were to have no communication between themselves, and then the general will would always result from the large number of small differences, and the decision would always be good. From Rousseau's view, factions try to bend public opinion towards their own particular self interest and away from the general will. The public is never corrupted, but it is often deceived, and on such occasions only does it seem to will what is bad. His concern was the public deceived by the factions that are gathered in pursuit uh, of achieving their own self interest. His next point is that will of all includes the sum of all particular wills based on private interests, and the general will refers to the resulting majority outcome based on common good. He thought particular wills composed of the general will that is an outcome of a majority based on common good. He thought as long as the particular will does not organize into factions, then the general will, based on reason, will always claim victory for the great association. And further, affection ascends to the majority through discourse and persuasion, and there is no longer a general will and the opinion which prevails as purely particular. He was also afraid of affection dominating the majority opinion through their persuasion. In order to prevent this, he thought we need a voting system which allows individuals to have one vote for each. In this way, general will is always enlightened and the people will not use democracy to actively deceive themselves. Rousseau's last point is that for a legislative body composed of representatives, the laws that come out of it will represent the interests of those legislators and cannot represent the interests of the society at large. He distrusted the representative democracy which allows representatives to have delegated the power to represent the will of the citizens. He thought we cannot trust those people to consider the benefits of a society as a whole. Whoever refuses to obey the general will shall be compelled to do so by the whole body. Further, the protection of a private property and private interest are considered as an injustice. He thought through public votes in a direct democracy, the consensus that is reached is a true greater than any individual could create because it is based on the checks and balances of many minds. He did not trust all people, but he trusted the decision made by votes of each. Okay, so here comes the summary. So it was about democracy and what could be a buffer to protect the true democracy and how to prevent the society to become a chaos. So James Madison he trusted that Republican government will function the best for the democracy. And Jean-Jacques Rousseau was a supporter of a direct democracy. So James Madison, he had a view on people that people are, we cannot really trust people in general to make a rational decision. And this was a somewhat different from the view of the Rousseau, who tries to trust people in general to make a rational decision. For Madison, people would always become faction, and the faction would create instability of the society. However, for Rousseau, people would become faction only in certain circumstances, like when a faction that gather of the people who pursues their own interest try to persuade or deceive those people through, of course, communication. For Madison, an effective buffer of the factions to create chaos in a society is a republican government composed of multiple leaders elected through votes of citizens. For Rousseau, an effective buffer is direct democracy where all people have one vote for each to make decisions. So you see the difference between Madison and Rousseau uh, for, uh, for the suggestion of the solution. So for Madison, he trusted elected representatives and he trusted they would make best decisions. So again, he was kind of supporters of elite politics. He thought those elite knows better than the lay people. So that was the Madison's view at the time. And Rousseau, he trusted individual people to make a best decision. So for Rousseau, he was with the side of those individuals, and he trusted the rationality of those individuals to make right decision if they are protected from any other external influence. So that was about two different views regarding democracy. And then we will have a discussion at the beginning of the class this week. So be prepared. And okay, so this was it for this week.